Hello, and welcome to the 14th episode of LGBTQIA+, Heroes, Icons, Legends, and Events. This series of programs covers a wide variety of topics, such as Two-Spirit, entertainers Cher, Dolly Parton, and Freddie Mercury, and the LGBTQ legends of women's sports. March is Women's History Month. The theme for 2022 is Women Providing Healing, Promoting Hope. Today we'll talk about the founder of modern nursing, who was also a statistician and social reformer. Today we'll talk about Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale was born on May 12, 1820, into a wealthy family. She was named after Florence, Italy, the city where she was born. Her older sister, Frances Parnelope, was also named after her place of birth, which is now part of the city of Naples, Italy. Their father, William Nightingale, was born William Shore. He inherited his wealth from his mother's uncle, Peter Nightingale, and with his inheritance, he changed his last name. The Nightingales traveled a great deal. When they were home, there were always parties and other social events. Young Florence preferred to spend her time reading and studying nature. She was a kind-hearted child who cared deeply for animals. Florence was clever and independent, and her father encouraged her education beyond the basics of the arts that girls normally studied. She studied mathematics, history, and science, and loved to sit for hours debating philosophy and world politics with her father. She also studied languages and became fluent in French, German, and Italian. She also learned Latin and classical Greek. The Nightingales had two homes in England. The first was a country house called Lea Hurst in Derbyshire, about 150 miles from London. Originally a 17th century farmhouse, it was renovated into a country home by Florence's father. It had 15 bedrooms and was large by most people's standards, but not by those of the wealthy aristocracy, with their large families and staff of servants. By their standards, it was a modest home built from local gray stone. Florence's parents, especially her mother Frances, wanted a larger, warmer home that would be better for holding large parties. In 1826, the family moved to the 80-bedroom Embley Park in Hampshire, England. They continued to spend extended periods of time, typically 3 months of each year, at Lea Hurst. The Derbyshire home was their country retreat and summer home. Florence didn't like sitting for portraits. She didn't want the attention. When her parents insisted that she sit for a portrait with her sister, she refused at first. She would rather have held a book for the portrait like her sister, but her parents wanted to promote her as a candidate for marriage, so she was pictured with an embroidery project. As an upper-class young lady, Florence was expected to perform charity work to help the less fortunate, and she was expected to become a wife and mother. But Florence refused to get married. She turned down several proposals. Politician and poet Richard Monckton Milnes proposed to her many times. She turned him down once and for all in 1849 after a 9-year courtship. It's thought that she had an unrequited infatuation with a cousin named Mary Ann Nicholson, pictured here with Florence in portraits drawn by Florence's sister. Florence wrote of Mary Ann, quote, "I have never loved but one person with passion in my life, and that was her." Florence also had 2 romantic relationships with women later in life, although it's not known if these relationships were consummated. Florence found comfort in her religious beliefs. She decided when she was 17 years old that she had a religious calling to assist the helpless and the sick. But despite the fact that she had cared for sick relatives on her family's estate, she was not encouraged to pursue a career in nursing, which at the time was associated with low social status. But Florence was determined to become a nurse. She studied to learn everything she could about healthcare and nursing. Through friends, Florence learned about a training hospital for nurses called Kaiserwerth in Dusseldorf, Germany. She was desperate to go there to learn about nursing, but her parents would not give their approval. In 1850, she made the journey to Germany without her parents' knowledge. Florence felt at home as soon as she arrived at the training hospital. She stayed at Kaiserwerth for 2 weeks and focused her attention on taking care of the sick and suffering patients. When she left for home, she felt brave and empowered by her new knowledge. She wrote a 32-page pamphlet to advertise Kaiserwerth to other people in England who might be interested in training there. The pamphlet was published in 1851, but Florence did not claim authorship to save her family the embarrassment. Florence eventually received her parents' approval to return to Kaiserwerth. She trained in basic nursing skills, assisted in operations, and administered medications. She also taught reading, writing, and mathematics to her fellow students, as many of her classmates had not received the same quality of education. She was 33 years old when she returned to England. In 1853, Florence accepted an unpaid position as the superintendent of the Institute for Sick Gentlewomen in Distressed Circumstances in London. She gradually improved the conditions by cutting unnecessary expenses. She arranged for pipes to be installed to deliver hot water to every floor. She started a library for the patients with her own books. She had new bed linens made to ensure the patients' comfort. She also came up with a system of bells that patients could use to get the nurses' attention. After a year, Florence was offered a new position as the superintendent of nursing at King's College Hospital in London. Before she could start her new job, the Crimean War broke out, with Turkey declaring war on Russia. Soldiers sent to defend Turkey were dying in large numbers due to the poor conditions in the hospitals in Turkey. Florence offered her services to the British Secretary of War, Sidney Herbert, who was a family friend. Herbert responded by accepting her offer, and Florence took a team of nurses with her to Scutari, Turkey. Florence and her nurses were not given a warm welcome by the doctors at the hospital. The men were not used to taking assistance or direction from women. The nurses worked hard to clean the hospital, and they bathed and fed the injured soldiers. It didn't take long for the doctors to realize that the nurses could be a valuable resource, since more than 700 wounded soldiers arrived daily from the battlefields. Florence worked 20 hours a day tending to the wounded soldiers. She slept and ate very little, and she kept busy making lists of needed supplies and writing reports to update the doctors on the conditions of the patients. She also used chalk to number the beds so doctors and nurses could keep track of their patients. She became known as the Lady with the Lamp and the Angel of the Crimea because she made rounds all night to check on her patients. Florence became very ill in May 1855 with what was called Crimean fever, which was most likely brucellosis, a bacterial illness contracted from contaminated milk. She refused to return to England and eventually recovered, although she would remain weak and prone to illness for the rest of her life. In 1855, the Nightingale Fund was established to show gratitude and respect for Florence's work, and the funds provided a way to raise money to continue Florence's efforts in Scutari and also to fund training for more nurses. Her work lifted the reputation of nursing from lower class and menial to a respectable profession. On March 30, 1856, the Treaty of Paris was signed, ending the Crimean War. Florence remained in Scutari until the hospitals closed. She finally returned to England in August 1856. Back in England, Florence had become a celebrity and a national hero. Songs and poems were written about her, and ships were named after her. Newborn girls were named in her honor. She was very unhappy with all the attention. She called the media attention tinsel, and she refused to sit for portraits. But she used her celebrity to promote hospital reform and to make nursing an important and respectable profession. The Nightingale Jewel was given to Florence by Queen Victoria in 1855. This gold brooch is said to have been designed by Prince Albert. It's engraved with a dedication from Queen Victoria, quote, "To Miss Florence Nightingale, as a mark of esteem and gratitude for her devotion towards the Queen's brave soldiers, from Victoria R., 1855. The brooch was not merely a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of the Queen's appreciation. The original brooch is now part of the National Army Museum collection. In September 1856, Florence received an invitation to meet with Queen Victoria. She accepted this high honor and met with the Queen and Prince Albert to discuss her ideas for providing better care for sick and injured soldiers in times of war. Queen Victoria awarded her the large sum of money of $250,000, which Florence used to fund a hospital and a training facility, the Nightingale Training School for Nurses. Florence published a book called Notes on Nursing in 1859. It was intended to help people care for sick family and relatives with practical advice that anyone could understand and follow. Her primary focus was on proper hygiene and proper nutrition. Florence wanted to prevent the mistakes made during the Crimean War from being repeated, so she worked with statisticians to create colorful and informative graphs called coxcomb or rose graphs. The graphs compared the mortality rates and causes of death of soldiers and civilians. She proved that soldiers had a mortality rate nearly twice that of civilians and that most of the deaths were caused by preventable diseases. The graphs were very useful for government officials, and they were used to make medical care for soldiers a top priority. For her work, she was named the first female member of the Royal Statistical Society. Florence was bedridden and homebound by the time she was 38 years old. She continued to work as her health deteriorated. She wrote hundreds of letters a month, more than 13,000 over the years, and she spent 12 hours a day writing. She was an authority and advocate for healthcare reform, and she advised on proper hospital procedures and public sanitation. Florence was always surrounded by her pets. She had as many as 17 cats at one time. Her most famous pet was an owl she adopted in Athens, Greece. The owl had fallen from its nest and was being pestered by unruly children. She kept her as a pet and named her Athena after the Greek goddess of wisdom. She carried the bird in her pocket or on her shoulder. Athena was a feisty bird who was prone to tantrums, but Florence loved her until her death in 1854. Florence was quite upset when the bird died. Upon the owl's death, Florence took her body to a taxidermist to preserve it. Florence was awarded the Royal Red Cross by Queen Victoria in 1883. She also became the first woman to be awarded the Order of Merit in 1907. In 1910, she was awarded the Badge of Honor of the Norwegian Red Cross Society. Florence died on August 13, 1910, at age 90. Her family was offered an elaborate funeral at Westminster Abbey, but they chose to honor her wishes and had a quiet service, then buried her near her childhood home at Embley Park. She was also honored with a memorial service at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. The Florence Nightingale Museum sits on the site of the original Nightingale Training School for Nurses in London, across the Thames River from Big Ben and the Palace of Westminster. The museum contains 3 separate pavilions that tell the story of her life. The Gilded Cage Pavilion relates the story of Florence's childhood and her struggle with social conventions. The section known as The Calling shows Florence and her team of nurses in the military hospitals where the legend of the Lady with the Lamp was born. The third pavilion, Reform and Inspire, tells the story of the reformer who campaigned tirelessly for health reform at home and abroad. Over 2,000 artifacts from her life are kept at the museum, including the prototype of her famous lamp. Her favorite pet, Athena's body, also rests in the museum as a reminder of her affection for animals. Many hospitals and museums have been named after Florence, and a number of statues have been erected in her honor. She is remembered every year on International Nurses' Day, which is celebrated on May 12th in honor of her birthday. To know more about Florence Nightingale, go to our website, gwinnettpl.org, to check out the following suggested items. The 100 Most Influential Women of All Time, edited by Kathleen Kuiper. Florence Nightingale by Kitson Jazinka. Florence Nightingale, The Making of an Icon by Mark Bostridge. Herstory, 50 Women and Girls Who Shook Up the World by Catherine Halligan. Magnificent Minds, 16 Pioneering Women in Science and Medicine by Pendred E. Noyce. Pioneers in Medicine from the Classical World to Today. Also, visit our website's digital resources to discover Canopy, our streaming service. Canopy has a wide selection of films and documentaries about LGBTQIA+ topics. Thank you for watching.